So the title of this message is The Apocalypse. So the last time I was here, about 3 years ago, I spoke about what it was going to be like when Jesus returned, and I was using the Old Testament to give us guidance. So if you look to the left at Jesus' first coming, he was the lamb that was led to slaughter, and there were about 200 prophecies that were fulfilled. But like 3 years ago, I spoke about the second coming from the prophecies of the Old Testament that are still left, and there's hundreds upon hundreds. And his first coming persona was that lamb. His second coming persona is going to be the slaughtering king. Okay, so the apocalypse. What does the word apocalypse mean? And should we fear apocalypse? The other day I was with some Christian friends, maybe people in my family, and I said to them, what happens, what comes to your mind when you think about the apocalypse? And the first word that came out of a certain person's mouth, my sister, she said, not this one. She said catastrophic events. And her new husband, about 72 years older, I think, he said disaster. And so my goal with this message is to change that thought. It's not wrong, but it's not really what the Bible teaches. Okay, so here is a Revelation chapter 1, verse 7. Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him. Somehow that's going to be on a round earth. I wonder how that's going to work. But every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. Okay, so here in the book of Revelation, God actually gives us a recipe to be blessed. And everybody here would love to be blessed. Me, I want to be blessed.
Amen.
Right? Yeah. And you guys can be blessed too. So what it says here, we can force a blessing from God our Father by just reading this verse here. So it says, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy. That would be me. And blessed are those who hear these words and who keep it, what is written in their heart. So let's be blessed by God with this discussion. Okay.
Amen.
So the reason that we say the word apocalypse is there's a Greek word called apocalypto. And we have what they call the English transliteration called apocalypse. That's the word. But the question is, what does apocalypse or revelation, what does apocalypto actually mean? And it means, as it says in Revelation chapter 1:1, it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, or the revealing of Jesus Christ to the world. So the word apocalypse from a biblical perspective does not mean war, famine, or pestilence like I've written there. It doesn't mean disaster. What it means is, on this planet right now, there are billions of people who've never even heard of Jesus. If anybody's been to China or the Far East or Japan, like as I have, I've asked maybe 50 people over the course of a few trips if they've ever heard of who Jesus was, and they say, no, we have no idea. They might know a little bit about Christmas and Christmas trees. But virtually no one over there, even an idiot, knows about Jesus. And even in China, where the scriptures have been translated for many, many years, that doesn't equal knowledge of Jesus. So my question here is, knowing that the apocalypse is the revealing of Jesus, should we be afraid, or should there be fear that comes to our hearts when we hear that the apocalypse is going to occur per what's written in the Bible in the book of Revelation? So I want to change our minds with this understanding. Okay, so I'm not expecting everybody to read all these words. The book of Revelation is broken down into 22 chapters. And I struggle to even know where to begin with this, and I'm not going to take too much time. But what I want to speak about here is how this book is organized. Now, there are myriads of interpretations on how to interpret this book. Some people believe that this book, these events, as written here, that they were fulfilled in 70 A.D. when the Romans attacked Judea. And so I want to speak about that for a minute. How did we even get the book of Revelation? Well, right here, John, the disciple John, the one whom Jesus loved, the only disciple that was at the foot of the cross, all the rest had fled. He was there. In 95 AD, he was banished on the island of Patmos in the Mediterranean. And he had a vision of Jesus. Jesus literally came to him when he was about 85 years old. And he said, John, I'm going to give you a vision, and you're going to write this vision down. And the events you're going to see in this vision are future events. So if that's the case, and everyone agrees that he received the vision in 95 AD, there's no real reason why God would have gave him Jesus would have given him a vision of previous events. So it's my opinion that this book is all future. And we'll just go through a few of those scriptures here. Now, chapter 2 and 3 is where Jesus literally dictates 7 letters to 7 literal churches in Asia Minor, which is Turkey today. And so many scholars agree or think that those 7 literal churches actually represent 7 types of churches in the here and now. So if you've read these letters, you can see that there's a church called Philadelphia. That's the faithful church. That's the only church that received a promise that Jesus said this. He says, I will keep you from a time of trial that will come upon all those who dwell on the face of the earth. And some of the other churches received condemnation. One of the churches actually performed satanic rituals. There's a church in there that is called the Dead Church. That's the Sardis Church. But we want to be the Philadelphia Church because that's the church that I would say flies away before a lot of these destruction events here. So scholars think that right now we are, from a chronological perspective, we are in the church age. And it's also my thought when you read the book of Revelation that it is mostly chronological, meaning that chapter 4 is after chapter 3. So when the church age is over with, and Jesus starts his return, his apocalypse, where he's revealed to the world, that these events will follow through. Now, we just happened to read chapter 12 as part of our service today. That spoke about Satan being cast down to the earth. Obviously, that's a little bit scary, I will admit. But the way I have organized this for us to read is John has a vision, which is chapter 4 and 5, which is a vision in the throne room of God. And you might remember what John sees. John sees God the Father on his throne with a scroll with 7 seals on it. And Jesus is the only one that's able to take the scroll from God the Father and begin to open these seals. Now, some people think that the scroll that God has, that he's given to Jesus, is a title deed to the earth. So for me, the title deed for my house is with the bank. Some people actually own their house. But right now, what is going on symbolically, I believe that God is handing over the deed to the earth back to Jesus because Satan has had his way with it for the last 6,000 years. Okay, so what happens is John sees Jesus in the heavenly realm take the scroll and begin to break the wax seals on the scroll. And as these wax seals are broken, events in the earthly realm begin to take place. And some of these events are very catastrophic. After the 6th seal events occurs, you'll hear people say the 6th seal, the 5th seal, the 2nd seal. You might hear that talked about before. And certain events begin. After the 6 seals occur in Revelation 6, there is another heavenly event. That's why it's highlighted green here. This is where a great multitude of peoples from every tribe and nation are worshiping in heaven at the throne of God. So we want to be there. And it's my opinion, folks who are faithful to Jesus prior to this series of events will be there. And I'm going to show you in the scriptures where that comes from. And then I draw a line of demarcation here because we want to be on this top side of that line. But for those who have rejected Jesus during this period of history, they will be subject to Satan and some of the things that Satan's going to cause. Let's just read about here. There comes trumpet judgments that begin to commence that cause cataclysmic events on the earth. This is what's scary. This is what my sister was speaking about. Cataclysmic events. Trumpet judgments 5 and 6 speak about demonic creatures persecuting people. Obviously, this is a horrific series of events that we do not want to be part of. And then a little while later, when you get to chapter 14, we have Jesus once again standing in heaven with his 144,000. And then at this point, there's a call for Jesus to go back and he harvests the earth. So there's a harvesting of the earth, in my opinion, of the folks who were tormented through here who came to know Jesus. And then the story continues on until you get down to chapter 19. And here we have Jesus returning on a white horse to take back the planet from the Antichrist, the beast, which is up here. And I apologize, that's not. You have handouts that have the same information. So the one point I want to make here is this, is that earthly events of the apocalypse begin in chapter 6 with the first seal. And we'll look at that in a second. And these earthly events end at chapter 19. And so these events end with Jesus on a white horse. And with him, riding behind him, is his bridal army, his bride, his faithful followers, who are leaving heaven with him behind him as he comes to take back earth. But we will see from seal 1, there is a rider on a white horse. But the mystery is, in the scriptures, it doesn't identify who that rider is. And that's why I'm here speaking with you guys today. So let's look at the seals. These events. So the first seal, when Jesus breaks the seal, in the earthly realm, the very first event in the earthly realm is there is a white horse rider who is a conqueror. And I highlighted him in green on purpose because I think I know who he is. He goes out, he's given a crown and a bow, and he goes out to conquer the nations. And then after him, there are 3 more horses. These are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There's the red horse rider, the black horse, and the pale horse. War, famine, and death occur on earth after those seals are broken. And then down here at the 6th seal, this is where there's a great earthquake and darkness, and every mountain moves out of its place. But I want to focus on this first seal. Okay. So in Revelation chapter 6, verse 2, it reads like this. And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. So there's a depiction there. You see that if you type in, you go to Google and type in the rider on a white horse, you'll see a depiction of what we just read. So the question I want to ask you all is, who is this rider that initiates the beginning of the apocalypse? Who is this rider that initiates the beginning of the revealing of Jesus to the world? Here is where I'm going to go a little rogue. If you listen to the Bible folks on the radio, like Dr. David Jeremiah, guys that have incredible Bible knowledge, most other people, about 95% of Bible commentators will say that the first horse is likely the Antichrist. And they'll say he is a false intimidator of the true Christ, who is associated with the white horse at Revelation 19. This is the beginning of the tribulation. And they're right, it is the beginning of the tribulation. But who is actually that rider? And what I'm going to show you next is that if you read the back part of the Bible that's not fulfilled, and for the life of me, I don't know why folks like Dr. David Jeremiah just don't go back and read parts of the Bible in the back, and you can identify who this rider is. And from Habakkuk 3, which is an unfulfilled Old Testament prophecy written 600 years before Jesus, when we look at what's written, and I've highlighted areas there, you can clearly see it's describing Jesus on a horse with a bow coming to save his people. So the idea that, say, folks would say that the Antichrist starts off the apocalypse and Jesus on a white horse ends it, I would say no. Scripture says that the apocalypse begins with this mysterious rider being revealed through the Old Testament unfulfilled scriptures. And there's more than one. There's actually 3 more. But you can see just what's written here. And we can say to ourselves, well, did this happen in times past? When Jesus came the first time, it says, God came from Timon, and the Holy One. Whenever you see the Holy One in the Old Testament scriptures, it's Jesus. It'll say the Holy One of Israel sometimes. The Holy One came from Mount Paran. Mount Paran is another word for Mount Sinai. It's like Jesus is going to start his end-time events where he started it with Moses, Mount Sinai. It says his splendor covered the heavens. The earth was full of his praise. This, to me, is the revealing of Jesus right here. This is the apocalypse. So when you look at this critically and say, well, did this happen at Jesus' first coming? The answer is clearly no. Then you might say, well, is that Jesus at Revelation 19? And the answer is no. Revelation 19 has a completely different description of Jesus. He has a robe that's covered in blood, and he has a sword, not a bow and a crown like that. Okay? And it goes on, it says here, it says, when it's you, Lord, rode on your horses, on your chariot of salvation. Here we have Jesus on a horse. You stripped the sheath from your bow, calling for many arrows. Here, he's calling for his arrows. I believe these arrows are the 144,000. He's calling for them. Just like in Revelation 6, it just says he has a crown and a bow, and he's on a horse. It's the same thing. And when this goes down, we learn more information. It says the sun and the moon will stand still in their place. You remember the old Bible story you read, Joshua chapter 10? When Joshua entered the promised land and he was fighting the Amalekites and he said, sun, stand still. Same thing. This is going to happen again. There's nothing new under the sun. Then it says, you, Lord, marched through the earth in fury. You threshed the nations in anger. That word threshing means separating the wheat and the chaff. Did Jesus tell us a story about separating sheep and goats? Yes, Matthew 25. This is the Matthew 25 event transpiring. Then it says you went out for the salvation of your people. That's green because it's good. He's saving his own people, using his anointed harvesters to help him. And then finally it says you crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck. Well, that's the fulfillment of the very first verse. I'm sorry if you can't see this in the Bible. Genesis 3:15 has God in the Garden of Eden with the serpent Adam and Eve. And God says to the serpent, he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, that's Eve, and between your offspring and hers, that would be Jesus. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. The striking of Jesus' heel, we know, is at the cross, when he was on the cross. But here we have Jesus fulfilling what God spoke about in Genesis. It all ties together. I'm almost there, guys. So we have three more. You've heard the but yet there's more, and we do. Psalm 45 speaks of Jesus riding out victoriously. The most handsome of the sons of men. Grace is poured on your lips, O mighty one. That's the Messiah. That's Lord. He rides out victoriously. He has arrows that are sharp. Jeremiah 4, down to the right. This is the first seal event occurring. Jeremiah 4 equals the first seal. Behold, he, that would be Jesus, comes up like the clouds. His chariots are like a whirlwind. His horses are swifter than eagles. At the noise of the horseman and the archer. That's somebody with a bow. That's Jesus. Then look over here at Micah chapter 1. It refers to a conqueror coming a second time, like the second coming conqueror, the second coming Messiah. So we have actually 4 sets of verses from the Old Testament that tell us that Jesus is this mysterious rider. So just to summarize, we can see here, when folks like Dr. David Jeremiah think that this is the Antichrist, I would ask, what scriptures do you have where the beast of Revelation 13 is on a horse with a bow? There are none. I'm not sure why they think that. But clearly here, we have the Bible interpreting the Bible for us. You have 6 references to Jesus on a horse, matching this mysterious rider. That's at Revelation 6, the beginning of events. So this is what I want to focus on this right now. So when someone says to you, the apocalypse, here Jesus, he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. This is Revelation 1:8. I am the beginning and the end. Now I could stretch this and say, from my perspective, the beginning of the apocalypse isn't war, isn't pestilence. It's Jesus on a horse coming to save his bride. So the beginning of events on planet Earth are Jesus coming to save his bride. The end of the events on planet Earth are Jesus returning back to the earth with his bride. So it's my humble opinion that we should not fear the apocalypse, the revealing of Jesus to the world. Okay, so I just want to close with this. Can anybody tell me when this verse, John 14, is read in the church? Does anybody know? Sorry, it's a trick question. What's that?
Yeah, I didn't hear what you said.
I said, can anybody tell me what... This is read every year in the church on a certain Thursday evening.
No.
I just gave it away. Maundy Thursday, that's right. So Maundy Thursday depicts Jesus at the Last Supper. And he was with his disciples. And then he knows his disciples were very nervous and scared. They didn't know what was going on. So Jesus, trying to assure his disciples, he says, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God and believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. For I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again, second coming, and I will take you to myself, that where I am, you may also be. Now, there's a tradition in Jewish literature about what a Jewish groom does before he goes and gets his bride. The tradition is this. The groom builds an addition onto his father's house. It's like for me, I lived in Dundalk. I would have built an addition on the back of the house at 3006 Dunmore Road. But obviously we don't live there. And I don't think, Nan, you'd be too happy about moving back to Dundalk. But I would have built an addition onto my house in Dundalk, and then I would have gone out in the middle of the night with my bridal party, my friends, and we would have gone and I would have snatched my wife away. That's the Jewish tradition, and that's what Jesus is talking about here. Okay, so Revelation 21. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them, and they will be his God. They will be their God. So is there any questions at all? Let me give the biggest question that I get when this is... Now, other people believe this. I'm not the only one. There's other people. It's a small group of eschatologists actually believe that Jesus is the rider on a white horse. What they might say is, they'll say, how can Jesus be popping the seals, breaking the seals, when he is in heaven, the heavenly realm, holding the scroll, and how can he be in two places at once? Well, if you know that Paul speaks about that right now we sit on thrones in the heavenly realm, but we can't perceive that. Heavenly time, that's why I coded it green, heavenly time is different than earth time. I don't understand it. For all we know, this has actually already happened, but it hasn't transpired on earth yet. So with that, I'm done. Thank you.